Hey everyone, and welcome to today's Explainer. We're diving straight into a metric that completely dominates global headlines and drives massive society-altering policy decisions, GDP. Now, we all know the acronym, but today we're going to look under the hood at exactly how it's calculated, and more importantly, why it directly dictates the reality of our daily lives.
You've definitely heard this one before. Phrases exactly like this are constantly scrolling across the bottom of our screens or headlining our news feeds. But despite its popularity as the ultimate scoreboard for a nation's economy, the actual day-to-day mechanics behind it, well, they're rarely discussed.
Okay, let's dive into this. Here is our quick roadmap for today. First, decoding the economic headlines. Second, defining gross domestic product. Third, we'll look at the small-town economy. Fourth, measuring the economic pulse. And finally, beyond the high numbers.
Section 1. Decoding the economic headlines. So why does everyone talk about GDP? Seriously, why is this one single acronym treated like the ultimate pulse check for an entire nation's well-being? Basically, every country's economy relies on it as the standard metric. Whenever politicians, business leaders, or financial experts debate the health of a nation, GDP is the anchor point they all instinctively return to.
Section 2. Defining gross domestic product. All right, let's get the official jargon out of the way. Gross domestic product, or GDP, is the total value of all final goods and services produced within a country during a specific period, which is usually measured over the course of 1 year. Ultimately, it just measures the sheer physical size of a country's economic output. So, in simple terms, when a nation reports a higher GDP, it literally just means they have a larger economy. They're producing more things and offering more services.
Section 3. The small-town economy.
Let's move to a sandbox example and see how this builds in practice. Imagine a tiny, self-contained small town made up of just 3 businesses. First, you've got a local bakery that produces bread worth $100,000 over the year. Down the street, a clothing store sells goods worth $200,000. And finally, a car repair shop earns $150,000 annually. You add them all up and boom, you get $450,000. That total production value is this town's GDP. It's really that simple. If you can grasp this basic math, you already understand how a massive national economy is calculated.
From there, scaling up to an entire country is merely a matter of scale. You zoom out from our 3 little businesses and you imagine adding the production value of every single business, factory, store, and service provider in an entire nation. The grand total of all that economic activity, that is the country's GDP. It's the exact same simple math, just applied on a massive countrywide scale.
Section 4. Measuring the economic pulse.
Now this is where things get very real. Look at the stark contrast in human impact here. A growing GDP signals a thrilling positive cycle. More production creates new jobs, which boosts incomes and leads to increased consumer spending. It's a great vibe. But contrast that with a falling GDP. If that number decreases for a sustained period, reduced production leads to layoffs, which fuels consumer fear, so they spend less, which further stalls the economy. It is a harsh reality that affects everyone.
Section 5. Beyond the high numbers.
Now, what's really interesting about this is it brings us to a huge, fascinating misconception. If a country is celebrating record-breaking GDP growth, does that guarantee that every citizen is living in luxury? Does a high GDP actually mean everyone is rich?
Well, not necessarily. A large GDP absolutely does not equal equally shared wealth. Think of it like a giant pie. GDP measures the total size of that pie, but it tells us literally nothing about how it's sliced. A nation can boast a booming economy on paper, while the actual wealth is heavily concentrated among a few, leaving others with very little. It's a measure of total volume, not equality.
Yet even with that massive limitation, GDP remains an incredibly powerful tool. Governments and businesses actively use this specific data to pull the levers of society and make massive financial decisions. They rely on it to plan government budgets, create overarching economic policies, figure out how to attract business investment, and just generally track overall economic growth.
GDP gives us the grand total, but to see the full picture, economists must also weave in data on income per person and the actual cost of living. GDP is a massive indicator for sure, but it is only one piece of a much larger economic puzzle. So, the next time you hear a news anchor touting a massive GDP increase, ask yourself, is the economy truly thriving for everyone, or is the pie just getting bigger for the people already holding the largest slices?
Thank you for joining me for this explainer. Stay curious and always keep questioning the numbers.